The opinions and views expressed by individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of this network, their group, or other organization they may be involved with.
I'm looking at myself, reflections of my mind. It's just the kind of day to leave myself behind. So gently swaying through the fairyland of love. If you'll just come with me, you'll see the beauty of Tuesday evening news. Tuesday evening
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Psychedelic Reporters for this Tuesday, the 11th, episode 218, here on NOK Network, the video news podcast focused on psychedelic medicine being reported in mainstream media. Shout out to the guys in Dead Ringer for Kirkland Lake, Ontario for the awesome intro track, originally recorded by the Moody Blues, with some customized changes for our show. I'm joined by my amazing joint hosts, Tara Simpson, along with the one and only Bufo Various, who has chosen all of our stories for us. Hello, Tara.
Well, hello, hobbies, and hello, everyone. I'd like to take a minute just to introduce Bufo. He's our Sonoran Desert Toad, Colorado Mud Toad. Did you know he emits DMT from his skin? And while that sounds like good fun, park rangers would like to remind everyone, please don't lick the toads. Don't lick the toads.
Don't like the toads. And you know, ironically enough, Bufo has probably been sick of us puppets trying to tickle his belly with our tongues, that he put out a news article right here, straight from the microdosesubtract.com or substack.com, and it states the psychedelic toad milk killers. Following toad poachers across the Sonoran Desert. When we do read this article, we do not condone any of these poaching methods, but an awareness of what's going on. This is written by Camon de Grief.
Yeah, so this is interesting. And this is exactly why we don't run through the parks and lick the toads, because, you know, there's a lot of harm that can be done to the population. So my increase in psychedelic toads began in 2020 when I found out they were being targeted by poachers in the Sonoran Desert. What a strange and crushing dissonance. The world's only known psychoactive animal, a marvel of evolutionary biology, was seemingly under threat due to demand for its secretions, which commonly elicited divine experiences for people who smoked them. I began reporting on this niche wildlife trade and got sucked in to a far bigger story about the search for transcendence and what it can cost. That eventually became a book, The Ego Trip, Psychedelic Toads, A Trail of Death, and the Guru Who Peddled Transcendence, which publishes tomorrow. Some questions reoccurred throughout. What does it mean when spiritual experience becomes available in the form of a product? When people on psychedelics get the sense that everything is connected, what might be hidden from sight? This excerpt is from my chapter about this dystopian market for toad medicine, my doorway into the entire project. If you read nothing else, please consider this. The same trip is available without harming any toads, just using synthetic 5-MeO DMT. In 2014, the conservationist, Robert Villa became soon to become the world's foremost defender of psychedelic toads, paid a visit to the Yaku,
I think it's the Yaqua or the Yagua.
Yaqua, an indigenous community in the Mexican state of Sonora. The tribe was facing an array of environmental threats, including the construction of an aqueduct that would drain the Rio Yaqui, historically one of the few perennial rivers in the region. Representatives had filed legal challenges, and these were disregarded. Began protests that included blockading the state's main highway. The backlash was swift and violent. Kidnappers, burned cars, homicides. Mexico was on its way to becoming the world's most dangerous nation for environmental activists. In 2021, an activist was murdered every week on average. Amid the spreading tumult, Villa learned on his visit a new and unsettling economy had taken root in Yaqui territory, a large-scale collection of Sonoran desert toads. Toads known in the Yaqui language as boko, or bobok. Is that bobok? Bobok? Feature predominantly the tribe's mythology. In one story, Toad borrows the wings of a bat to fly up into the clouds, where he tricks the Rain King into ending a devastating drought. In another, he brings fire to the tribe after stealing it from the gods and carrying the flames in his mouth. The Yaqui would decorate Sonoran desert toads with ribbons and parade them ceremonially, praying for rain. In a far cry from its exalted status, toads were now being caught en masse for the psychedelic market, where they were prized as source of 5-MeO DMT, a powerful fast-acting compound also known as the God molecule. In one instance, or so the rumors went, a truck had been discovered carrying 2 tons of the animal. Wow, 2 tons. I mean, toads don't weigh much. So that's a lot of freaking toads.
Yeah, that's a lot of frogs.
Yeah, Villa related all of this to me the first time I called him back in 2020. After several stories had him quoted as raising the alarms about toad poaching, he introduced himself on the phone as a freelance naturalist and told me he owned 2 Gila monsters, a giant lizard with black and orange scales, in addition to a Sonoran desert tortoise named Virgil, whom a family member had given him at the age of 5. He later acquired a pet gopher snake and took it along to catechism class. He became especially fond of sea turtles. In middle school, on his first day of orchestra practice, both Villa and his teacher were wearing turtle T-shirts. She introduced him to some herbologists and became Villa's earliest mentor. Like the tortoise, Villa is now in his mid-30s. He is small and puckish, with deeply tanned skin and a shock of black hair that he tidies into a top knot. He was a masterful violinist, even though he stopped taking lessons when his parents could no longer afford them. With his striking looks and eccentric interests, he is like a character dreamed up by Wes Anderson. In the summer of 2023, when I visited him in Arizona, in an Arizona heat wave, he went into the art house cinema to watch Anderson's latest film, Asteroid City. At one point, a single cowboy made a throwaway remark about a toad swindle, and Villa turned to me with an expression of delight.
Yeah, so a few years after his visit to Yaqui the key territory, Villa appeared in a voice documentary about the toads. Speaking about their natural history, Villa saw the flood of interest as deeply concerning, a cognitive renaissance with the wellness motifs of the psychedelic renaissance, as he later wrote. It was difficult enough to control demand for wildlife products with more tedious therapeutic effects, like rhino horn. What could there be for an animal to develop genuine states of transcendence? Amphibians are the most imperiled group of vertebrates globally, with around 40% of the approximately 8,000 known species threatened by extinction. The outlook is especially bleak in Mexico, where habitat loss, climate change, and diseases like the chytrid fungus have already caused devastating losses. Villa had heard of the Cenarian desert toads, which reached the size of small chickens, vanishing from certain areas. He worried about the overexploitation would drive further declines without anybody paying attention. Not long after the Vice episode aired, he met a Tucson artist who wished to print a sacrificial Nike t-shirt featuring Sonoran Desert Toad and the words "Just Smoke It." Villa urged him to publicize risks to species instead to raise awareness. He and the artist collaborated a new design protect the Sonoran Desert Toad. The shirt read, "Please trip responsibly." Villa was the first to sound the alarm about Sonoran Desert. Wasn't the first. Albert Moe himself, the first documented toad smoker in history, had shared a cautionary fable from Aesop. A certain man who the good fortune to possess a goose that laid a golden egg every day, but dissatisfied with slow in income and thinking to seize the whole treasure at once he killed the goose. Shortly thereafter, toad smoking, he was descended to ethically dubious trip in the Ethnogen Review, an underground newsletter about psychoactive substance. Its editor had kept 4 of the animals in a terrarium for a while, giving up milking them. An extraction of venom one creates a lot of fear and stress in a fellow creature, he explained. But in 1994, the arrest of California school teacher on toad smoking changes set of a media frenzy, bringing new attention to the species. Alas, alas, the Pathogens editor lamented. The distorted publicly has now made it a hip thing. Whew. A reader from Arizona wrote in Express to dismay about the harm of decimation that might result when all the unhappy hordes pursue another way to get off at the expense of the toad. That is a weird sentence to put in my head. Through the deep passage of evolutionary time, Sonoran desert toads have proved extraordinarily resilient to change. Fossils of their skeletons have been discovered alongside anteaters, camels, mammoths, ground sloths, capybaras, and other creatures that once roamed the lusher green region. Despite its ancient appearance, the Sonoran desert toad is genealogically young. As recently 11,000 years ago, an eye break in Earth's history, higher rainfall supported woodland trees and shrubs. Further back in time, tropical and deciduous forests formed canopies. During the wetter months, as conditions grew hotter and drier, many species dried off, migrated, but the toads endured, burrowing underground up to a point where the toads have accommodated and perhaps even prospered from the rise of humans. Nearly 1,500 years ago is what is now Arizona. How come farmers created an expansive network of irrigation canals, excavating channels with perfectly sloping gradients? Hundreds of square miles of dry land flourished with corn and other crops, and the toads had abundant new waters to swim in. The hawk disappeared a few hundred years later, and researchers believe the population grew too rapidly, outstripping the availability of resources. The channels remained behind remnants of lost civilization, and during monsoons, the toads continued to breed in them. In the 19th century, settlers in Sonora began using steam engines to pump groundwater. Rain that fell in the desert sank quickly through its permeable sands, filtering into the deep and inaccessible aquifers. And now some of that water has returned to the surface in the 1940s. Technological advances enabling the drilling of even deeper wells, driving a massive expansion of cotton and wheat farming west of the Hermosillo. This was welcome development for the toads, who congregated around reservoirs, ditches, and stock ponds. Within few exceptions, it is found only in wet places around the cattle watering troughs of the ranchers. Some herpetologists wrote in the early survey. Electric lights acted as magnets for flying insects, serving all-night buffets for the toads. During the rainy season, when the toads emerged, Sonorian residents would switch off their outdoor lights to avoid being inundated. Huh.
Yeah, yet as adaptable as they were, the Sonoran desert toads were not prepared for the onslaught of psychedelic interest. Humans are nimbler than other predators with a far greater appetites. Whether the toads hopped, scrambled, or froze, hoping to evade detection, their new pursuers could easily scoop them up and press on their glands. While toad smoking remained a fringe activity, this was a rare experience for the animals, with the rest went on with their lives, mating, feeding, hiding out from the sun. This fragile balance began to shift when the psychedelic practitioner Octavio Redditch was introduced to the medicine in 2006. With Dr. Jerry by his side, he set about milking thousands of toads each summer, amassing kilograms of dried secretion. Octavio is simply unstoppable. A practitioner who went collecting with him in 2014 recalls even enthusiastically doing jumping jacks between toad milkings. The restricted habitat of the toad, an endemic species found nowhere else on Earth, meant the entire world's supply had to be sourced from the Sonoran Desert. As demand for the medicine exploded, a new economy took shape to provide it. People could catch toads in Arizona, but the epicenter was in Sonora, which itself was in the midst of a violent transformation. In 2026, the Mexican government had deployed military troops to fight off narco traffickers who smuggled cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine worth billions of dollars each year in the U.S. The cartels responded by professionalizing their security forces, acquiring AK-47s and mounted machine guns for shooting down helicopters. Mexico's drug wars intensified, and national homicide rate tripled over the next 5 years. Vast areas of Sonora became no-go zones, and people who visited risked their lives. This landscape took excessive violence, also harbored the toad, an animal in demand globally for spiritual experiences and inner healing, including from addiction to the very drugs being trafficked. A collision between these disparate worlds seemed to be inevitable. In 2016, Dean Jeffries, the founder of a Facebook group about toad smoking, spent several weeks in Mexico shooting footage for a documentary. Jeffries is the epitome of the New Age elder with salt-streaked hair and a white beard. He usually wears colorful unbuttoned shirts. One night, while driving around searching for toads, he was pulled over by armed men. The cartel have a whole network, he recalls. As soon as a strange car comes in, people are notified. I was staring down the barrel of a gun. Just weeks earlier, he reported an unsuspecting woman from the United States had been kidnapped while looking for toads and was held for several days. In a Facebook post, Jeffries warned that the desert is definitely not the place where you can just go and find some toads. As Sonera became more dangerous, demand for the medicine only rose. Collecting toads had become perilous, creating an opportunity for local intermediaries who could move through toad habitats without arousing suspicion. One of the first to assume this role was the burly resident of Hermosillo named Carlos Becerra, who around 2014 began supplying buyers in Mexico and abroad. Becerra has a circular face and rounded shoulders, giving him a faintly toad-like appearance. According to his rivals, he has a ruthless disposition. He soon rose to become the world's biggest toad medicine supplier. In the early days of his operation, Becerra began selling toad to Mario Garnier, a former TV producer in Mexico City. Garnier had been introduced to the toad smoking a few years earlier and left everything behind: his job, a voiceover studio, a production school where he taught, to begin what he later described as a spiritual journey with the medicine. He began serving toad and sourcing medicine for people in his network. One of his friends, a former corporate lawyer, was soon hosting as many as 1,000 sessions per year. Garnier went from buying 10 grams a month from Becerra, enough for several hundred strong doses, to 10 times as much. But when Garnier tried to negotiate the price down, Becerra refused, and their relationship soured. Wow.
Yeah, and then Garnier's telling Barraza was a thug who was seizing control of the toad market by force. He was very violent, Garnier said, with elaborating further. Others described Barraza to me in similar ways. Garnier himself acknowledged experiencing the kind of mania at the time. Wanted to save the world with toad medicine. The God molecule had found another emissary. I was in the Messiah state, Garnier said. In 2015, seeking new suppliers, he set off deeper into Sonora, where the toads were even more plentiful. He met people who had formerly caught toads for Octavio. He paid them with bottles of liquor, Garnier told me. They were giving him the medicine without knowing what it was. Octavio denies this. Garnier had former relationships with practitioners in Europe, and he wanted to sell them collectors in Sonora. Large orders started coming in from Spain, the Netherlands, and Germany. A built medicine bridge, Garnier said. Then people who became greedy. Later in a text message, he seemed to acknowledge his own complicity. The molecule is like the ring of Tolkien, he wrote, using a metaphor I'd already heard. Creates greediness, thirst of power. Kimon de Gret was de Grief was written for the New Yorker, New York, the New York Times, the Guardian, and other publications. First book co-authored with Shu Hood. Later, his Poacher Confessions with Abby and Underworm. He lives in Cape Town. This is all from the Ego Trip, Psychedelic Toad, and Trail of Dust, and the Guru Who Peddled Transcendence. This was a good read, and they say it's like the ring, but I think the human part is the ring, because you realize the greed in it.
Yeah. And again, I mean, this is bad. We don't want people going and harvesting these toads. They only really reside in one area in large populations, and I get that people want the medicine, but can we not find a sustainable breeding program to bring this medicine to people, where we're not going into the wild and harming the ecosystem, essentially, right? These toads live on things in the desert that, without them are going to become overrun. And not to mention, we don't want to lose the population and not have access to this medicine. So, this really brings some awareness to what is actually happening out there and where this is actually coming from.
Amen. And speaking of awareness, that brings us into our next article. And this is off of menshealth.com. And can MMA fighters taking psychedelics unlock the future of brain health. These researchers think so. 10 combat sport fighters suffering from traumatic brain injuries went to Medellin, Colombia for 8 days of psychedelic neuroplasticity enhancing treatment. The lessons could benefit all of us. And this is from Mathia Busi, photographs by Edison Ivan Armoya.
Yeah, a deep blue darkness hangs over the lush forested mountains 60 minutes south of Medellin, Colombia, as the shaman, with reverent eyes and without saying a word, pours a dose of ayahuasca tea into a single wooden cup. In the back of a ceremony teakwood longhouse known as a malosa, a boutique lodge called La Wayra, 10 fighters, a scrum of boxers, mixed martial artists, and wrestlers step forward one by one to drink the thick Amazonian potion, intensely bitter and instantly nauseating, like burnt coffee, dredges, and vinegar. La Wayra calls himself an authentic ancestral medicine retreat and claims that the healing will be swift and refreshing like the breeze. Mattresses are laid out side by side beneath the Maloka cathedral, like palm thatched roof. Eucalyptus trees surround the structure. Their silvery blue-green leaves rustling gently in the wind. Tropical kingbirds chirp sharply, and saffron finches sing in cheerful melodic bursts. The occasional toad, ribbits, and weird arrays of noises emerge into soothing orchestrations. As twilight fades to darkness, the songbirds fade with it, and the nocturnal chorus takes over. Dry, percussive clicks of grasshoppers and electric whining of cicadas swelling into the dense hypnotic hum that reverberates around Maloka. These 9 men and 1 woman aren't taking one of the world's most intense hallucinogens just for self-discovery. The Aaron Rodgers, Will Smith, Joe Rogan, and many adventures and seekers across America have done. The fighters are part of a first-of-its-kind pilot study involving researchers affiliated with the University of California, Riverside, and the University of College London to determine the therapeutic potential of ayahuasca for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder among athletes and veterans. Combat sports are built on the ritualized infliction of blows to the head with fists, elbows, knees, and feet. MMA fighters endure thousands of subconcussive blows to the head over their careers. They are celebrated precisely for their violence, their capacity to administer and withstand punishment, but the reckoning with what the violence leaves behind. Sorry, I've got allergies today. Leaves behind is just the beginning. Because mainstream treatments for the debilitating effects of TBI and post-concussion syndrome are not limited primarily to symptom management, pain meds to soothe headaches, anxiety, antidepressant drugs to help with mood, and stimulants to address the fatigue. A shadow circuit has quietly formed. Fighters, military veterans, and other underserved by mainstream medicine are traveling to Latin America to take psychedelics, hoping for the kind of healing they have not found anywhere else.
Yeah, so ayahuasca is a brew made from the leaves of the Chagra panga bush, which contains the psychedelic compound dimethyltryptamine, which is DMT, and the woody stems of the Banisteriopsis can't be mine. It's been used for centuries by indigenous people in Colombia to investigate the causes of illness, seek spiritual counsel on personal or communal problems, and facilitate communication with supernatural forces, also known as Yag, or simply la medicina. Ayahuasca promises a largely unpleasant trip for about 6 hours. I like how it says a largely unpleasant trip of about 6 hours, characterized by vomiting, spasms, and deep introspection. The DMT activates the body's serotonin receptors, critical to the reception and cognition, and is known to improve emotional processing and unleash long repressed memories, often in vivid visions. This group of fighters and researchers is hoping it can do even more. The scientists who designed this study believe several ayahuasca sessions can trigger structural changes in in damaged brains and help heal them. Fernando Jojan, the 34-year-old indigenous Colombian shaman, mutters prayers in his white tunic with colorful embroidery depicting Amazonian's river dolphins leaping in macaws gazing out upon the jungle. A brilliant beadwork jaguar pendant sits upon his chest, symbolizing not only for predator but a figure of power, knowledge, and transformation. Some of the fighters sweat and twitch as they await their dose. Others stand unmoving and serious, their game faces locked in, bowing when they receive the cup. 4 looks goofy and completely out of place. They were wearing tight fabric caps on their heads with electrodes wired to an EEG machine that will monitor their brain activity. This data, alongside with brain scans of all the participants taken before, during, and after the ayahuasca ceremonies, will help a team of scientists track how the psychedelic affects the brains. 3 of the scientists are here with us, along with Aya McCall and Nijay Nutspan, 2 of the co-founders of Athletes Journey Home, the nonprofit that helped organize the retreat. The subsidized cost is $495 for each fighter, which included 4 ayahuasca ceremonies over 8 days. I wonder if that includes the trip and shit too. Probably
Yeah,
not.
or whether that's just the cost to attend for the medicine. You probably have to pay your own flight and your own accommodate. Well, I guess you'd be accommodated on site, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know how that works out. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one by one, the fighters sipped their doses. Former MMA champion Fernando Marrero, a 47-year-old middleweight known as Philadelphia Badass, goes last. In 2011, his first professional MMA fight, Mario was caught in a crucifix submission and suffered a bruising loss. He felt ready to get back into the octagon, but says a doctor found signs of impact concussion, and scans later showed evidence of traumatic brain injury, included cerebellar atrophy, a type of injury that can affect coordination, balance, and motor control. He would not be licensed to compete again for almost 3 years. After he finally passed his cognitive test in 2014, he returned to the cage but absorbed a barrage of unanswered punches to the head and lost by a knockout. Still, Moreo wanted to fight, and then he rattled off a 10-fight winning streak in the Gladiator Challenge, but brain fog and hypervigilance, 2 symptoms of TBI, stayed with him, and they exacerbated by a car accident. Damn, this guy had no luck. And I was on edge, walking around on edge with a chip on my shoulder. Damn right. He tells me Regular migraines and tinnitus scrambled his thoughts. I would have something in my mind and then be like, why did it just leave my brain like that? Muriel knocks back his cup with a grimace and examines the ground on all fours. His shoulders tense, his body convulses. The hum of the jungle is punctured by a deep heave rising from his chest. Vomit strikes across his red plastic bucket with a white thud and that vertebrates through the maloca. His journey has just begun.
Yeah, Medeiros knocks back his cup with a grimace and crumples onto the ground, onto all fours. His shoulders tense, his body convulses, and then the hum of the jungle is punctured by a deep heave rising from his chest. Vomit strikes his red plastic bucket with a wet thud that reverberates through Malacca. His journey has begun. Or did you just read that?
I just read that, but it sounded better when you did it. We're on the psychedelics remain largely.
Oh, okay. Psychedelics remain largely illegal in the United States, but on April 18th, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to speed up research and expand access to psychedelic treatments for serious mental illness, especially among veterans. Today's order will ensure the people suffering with debilitating symptoms might finally have a chance to reclaim their lives, Trump said in the Oval Office. Podcaster and psychedelic superfan Joe Rogan stood behind him, along with Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I have seen so much overwhelming anecdotal evidence, but also clinical studies that at last to the therapeutic effects of psychedelics, Kennedy said on the recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Some of the fighters on the retreat were introduced to ayahuasca through the podcast, and Kennedy previously told how one of his sons processed the death of his mother. Kennedy's former wife, Mary Richardson Kennedy, who died by suicide in 2012 in an ayahuasca ceremony, he said he was completely changed and he was very open to talking about his feelings. Kennedy said in 2024, the reason I really know it changed him is that he started taking out the garbage and doing the dishes. Soon after the order was signed, the FDA said it was fast tracking the reviews of 3 therapy options: psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, psilocybin for major depressive disorder, and methadone, similarly structured to MDMA for PTSD. The stakes are high. The suicide rates among veterans rose in 2023, and with 17 former service members on average dying by suicide per day. Looking at the general population of people suffering from TBI in America are nearly 3 times more likely to kill themselves than people without it. In terms of long-term recovery of major brain functions, there's a need for effective treatment for TBI, said Matthew Johnson, PhD and Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Johns Hopkins University. But the evidence for ayahuasca and DMT in treating TBI remains largely absent in clinical research. DMT is a DEA Schedule I drug, meaning it has no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. However, researchers at Imperial College London recently published a study of 34 people who had lived with major depressive disorder for years and had tried conventional treatments without success. They found that a single dose of DMT administered via IV infusion immediately reduced depression symptoms with improvements lasting up to 3 months. Treating depression is different from treating TBI, but this kind of data indicates to researchers that DMT could have potential medical uses. There is evidence that psychedelics shake up the brain, temporarily relaxing its often ego-dominated patterns and making us more open to new thoughts, feelings, and perspectives that might otherwise be hard to access. In April, a team of leading neuroscientists reported in Nature Medicine that psychedelics, including psilocybin and DMT, may make the brain more interconnected by reducing the usual separation between its networks. One of the network's affected is the default mode network, widely considered a biological counterpart to the psychological construct known as ego, with which governs our sense of self and internal stories as we tell ourselves who we are.
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting, fine article. We didn't even get into the gist of it. I mean, they go into the whole part, the journey begins, and we're talking people in a professional thing. And I like that Bufo's added this in here, and I encourage you to read this article on your own. Psychedelics, Ayahuasca, MATVI is what it's titled.
Yeah, and what I like is this isn't just Joe Blow who lives down the street that nobody knows that's talking about this. These are professional fighters and boxers people know of, and they're going and having ceremony and coming back feeling better and speaking about it. And that brings awareness when it's not just some like nobody down the road, and people actually go, wow, this famous person, they've suffered all this stuff and they went and did this and it helped them. Opens up people's minds to the fact that, these people didn't do this to go and get high. They went to go and heal, and it worked for them.
Right.
So, right. That's
yeah, they're not the money making machine that people make them to be as athletes. These are real people. These are real people getting out there like boom, 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 and then like not feeling right, like
suffering real consequences. Absolutely. But they have the right to heal. And if this medicine works for them, then that's going to speak some volumes to our healthcare, medical, pharmacy realm of things, right? We're having more success with things we made illegal than the things that we have on the market today. Why is that?
And I'm looking forward to more studies into this realm. So it's medication time.
That's right, folks. A little late, but still going to happen. So stay tuned while we take a short break and hear from some of our amazing sponsors. And then we'll return with more articles Bufo has chosen, making mainstream media news.
Back in 4 minutes and 20 seconds here on Psychedelic Reporters on NLK Network.
Dirty Dave, award-winning cultivator for over 4 decades. Dirty Dave, prized genetics fueled by advanced nutrients, original OG organics. Dirty Dave, award-winning products available at these fine establishments. Ask your shop to carry Dirty Dave. Contact us at dirtiesdoggies@gmail.com.
Established in 2013, Northern Ontario Cannabis Education and Resources is here for you. NOSER Director Kim Cooper brings you 45 plus years experience utilizing cannabis as a medicine, and she is spreading that education across the North. Don't be a jackass. Say no, sir, to propaganda with NOSER. Find them at www.nocer.ca.
Hey, hi, my name is John Mark, aka Sublimator Warrior, and I would like to welcome you to Smoke Signal in Tyendinaga.
One dab make your whole dome drip sweat. One dab make the homies all dip set. One dab, only really need one dab. One dab.
Smoke Signal is a medical dispensary where you can get all your products and
Might
needs.
just start vaping a whole bunch. Might just start laying up the blunts. God. Ooey, ooey, gooey, that's a sticky dab. Sticky dab. Might just have to put this one on Instagram. Go and hold it in, feel it in your ribs.
So come and check us out in Tyendinaga. 55 Highway 49 in Tyendinaga. It's on the res, and we're open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week.
Hey, dudes and dudettes. Enjoy the show, man.
Hey, welcome back. We're back from our medication session live here on Psychedelic Reporters on NOK Network.
And we have another set of. Whoa, that was a good truffles. We have another set of stories coming at you from the realm of psychedelic medicine. So let's get at it. Oh, yeah. So our next story comes out of Newsweek.com. And I'm really glad Bufo's put this in because we've been hearing all the bells and the buzz and the whistles, and it's caused confusion. VA launches a psychedelic drug trial for veterans. Here's who can take part. And this is written by Matthew Robinson.
Yeah, the Department of Veterans Affairs has launched a new medical trial to determine the effectiveness of using psilocybin to treat depression in veterans. In April, President Donald Trump issued an executive order to expand access and trials of psychedelic drugs to combat serious mental illness rates across the United States. The VA Secretary, Doug Collins, said in a news release on Wednesday, far too many veterans are living with mental health conditions that don't respond to available treatments. Under President Trump, VA is pursuing all avenues to evaluate new treatment and offer meaningful relief for those who have worn the uniform. This clinical trial reflects another step towards this goal. Who can take part? The trial, named Psilocybin Intervention for Veterans Overcoming Treatment-Resistant Depression, enrolls veterans who have treatment-resistant major depressive disorder, including those who also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. The study is expected to compare the clinical outcomes of participants taking two different dosages of psilocybin, one of the psychoactive ingredients in magic mushrooms. This includes observing participants' reported levels of depression before and after treatment. The trial is set to be conducted at the following five locations: Birmingham VA Healthcare Systems in Alabama, Tuscaloosa VA Medical Center in Alabama, VA Portland Healthcare Systems in Oregon, Corporate Michael J. Crescences, VA Medical Center in Philadelphia, and VA Puget Sound Healthcare Systems in Seattle. The VA said regarding the trials of psychedelic drugs, the VA strongly discourages self-medicating or attempting to replace other mental health treatment options with psychedelics or any other unprescribed substances. Proven evidence-based treatments are currently available at VA facilities to treat veterans with mental health conditions. Veterans should always consult their healthcare providers before making any treatment decisions.
So other VA trials taking place. The VA is currently involved in 20 active trials looking at psychedelic treatments for mental health conditions. The Food and Drug Administration has granted breakthrough therapy designation for a number of companies developing substances such as MDMA, LSD, and psilocybin, allowing for expedited analysis and trials. In many, the VA announced a new trial looking at the efficacy of MDMA assisted therapy in the treatment of severe mental health disorders. The trial is taking place at the VA Providence Healthcare System, enrolling about 80 veterans at VA facilities in Providence, Rhode Island, and West Haven, Connecticut. This trial represents an important step in safety evaluating new approaches and innovations to treat veterans with severe mental health conditions, Collins said at the time. In July, the VA and Department of Health and Human Services, which is HHS, signed a memorandum of understanding to support the implementation of Trump's April executive order. My bad. And that was April 18th, right before 420. The MOU creates a framework for increased VAHHS cooperation on psychedelic trials. This includes providing training for doctors, nurses, and therapists, collecting and sharing data on the effectiveness of therapies, and developing educational materials for patients. Health Secretary Robert F. J. Kennedy Jr. said last month, America owes every veteran the best care our nation can provide. We're not going to wait while promising treatment, sit on the sidelines. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, HHS and VA are working together to develop safe FDA approval innovations and transition them from research into care so veterans can access the treatments they deserve. Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I just lost the story here. Hang on.
Trump's executive order is where we're at.
Yeah. Where'd it go? It's down here. Trump's executive order on April 18th announced his historic drug policy reform to ease the restrictions in the use and trialing of psychedelics to support veterans' health. In many cases, these experimental treatments have shown life-changing potential for those suffering from severe mental illness and depression, including our cherished veterans, Trump said at the signing of the executive order. Our veterans are having a tremendous hard time. He added, it's for a lot of people, but it's for our military in particular. The suicide epidemic among veterans, and it's a national tragedy. Since 9/11, we've lost over 21 times more veterans' lives to suicide than on the battlefield. Today, we're bringing new hope. Trump's order directs federal agencies to accelerate research, review potential approval of psychedelic-based treatments for serious mental illness, particularly for patients who have not responded to existing therapy. The order states that for over 20 years, there have been more than 6,000 veteran suicides each year, and that the current rate of suicide is more than twice as much as the non-veteran adult population. And that's really sad, but I'm glad they're doing something about it. That's so important. They didn't ask for this. They signed up to help our countries and do what they felt was right. And they suffer from those consequences of doing what was right. And if we can help them rather than them taking their own lives, why wouldn't we? We're not doing any harm. So that's the important thing.
Us puppets were working in the treatment field before we started doing podcasting and stuff. And one of the gentlemen that we befriended and was the best man in our wedding, we were in their wedding. He is a man that is all about abstinence and not taking medications. And before Mr. Kennedy Jr. was in that position, he got flown out of the Indianapolis HHS to go and help in the national level. And his dad actually suffered from some of these things and was doing natural medicines himself. So he went into this job with a clarification of seeing it firsthand of how it could heal someone. So the more we see this in our things, the more it's going to keep on. I love it. I love it. We're going to keep seeing this story.
Yeah, absolutely. But those stories, they're so important to what we're doing here and bringing awareness. We need to keep bringing those stories forward.
Yes, and that brings us to that being the last article. So thank you for joining us here on Psychedelic Reporters on NOK Network and for tuning in to our video podcast on NOK Networks and Rumble and YouTube pages, as well as our social media sites.
That's right, folks. We hope you've enjoyed your update today of mainstream media coverage of psychedelic medicine advancements from around the globe.
Many thanks to our sponsors, to Kim Cooper in the back, pulling all the buttons and the puppet strings and the human strings, and to my joint hosts, Tara Simpson, and to Blueful Alvarius for choosing the stories, and to you, our listeners, for joining each week on Psychedelic Tuesday. Let's hear from Dead Ringer again from Kirkland Lake on our way out. I'm looking at myself, reflections of my mind. It's just the kind of day to leave myself behind. So gently swaying through the fairyland of love. If you'll just come with me, you'll see the beauty of